Hello and welcome to PGurus. This is Jayanthi. The Indian civilization is rooted in dharma, and dharma is rooted in the pursuit of knowledge, jnana, and a respect for nature, prakriti. A civilization is, of course, influenced and shaped by its worldview, but we know surprisingly little about our civilizational heritage, which created an environmentally respectful and knowledge centered society. To reconnect with our civilizational heritage, we begin a series of conversations with a very special guest, author and commentator Sahana Singh. Sahana Singh has made it her mission to research and document various aspects of our civilizational heritage, including water, waste management, and education. She has authored two books. A first book, The Educational Heritage of Ancient India, How an Ecosystem of Learning Was Laid to Waste, discussed the role played by our civilization in spreading knowledge around the world. Her second book, titled Revisiting the Educational Heritage of India, explores this in greater depth. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Sahana ji to our show today. Sahana ji, welcome.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a
It is
pleasure. I think it's been 2 years since I came on PGurus. The last I came was to speak to, in fact, I was the guest host interviewing Sinu Joseph.
yes, and those conversations are so important for us to have. Sahana ji, I would love to start from the very beginning. You started your career as an environmental engineer, but life took you on a different journey. Could you talk a little bit about that journey and what led you down this path?
Yes, I studied environmental engineering and I worked in India as an environmental engineer for some time. And then I met my future husband there while I was working. We got married and then we moved to Singapore a couple of years after that. So that's when I started writing. So I made that whole switch from engineering to writing for a journal which was on water and wastewater. So because I always liked writing, so here was an opportunity to write for a magazine that was read by engineers all over Asia, and in fact even in the US and Europe. It was called Asian Water, and it's focused on the water problems of the Asian region. So that's how I initially started as an assistant editor, and I moved up and became the editor. And then pretty much I was running the magazine, so I would decide what goes in the magazine. So that's when I made a lot of discoveries about Asia, because I would travel. I traveled to China, the Eastern Asia, lots of countries, saw the water issues. In those days, I would just be writing about water. All I would see was there is a water problem and how are the different countries managing. And I saw a lot of similarity. And then I also visited India many times in connection with water conferences. And that's how it was going. But I was not, I was, of course, reading books written by historians like Dr. N.S. Rajaram, Dr. David Frawley, and many others. So I knew that there is, since I was always interested in history, I knew that there is, we don't know the true history of India. We are mostly, what we studied in school was all the colonial version of history, right?
Right.
Colonial, whatever, leftist historians, whatever you call it. But
Yeah.
I was sticking to my topic of water and wastewater and those kind of things. But then it all changed when we moved to the US. So, and when in the US, that's when I realized that it's time for me to speak up, because I saw my daughter's history textbook, and I saw the way India has been represented in that.
Yeah.
And all along, I was teaching my daughter, telling her things. I was telling her about the culture. But now
Right.
here in the school, she's learning something which made no sense to me. The only
Yeah.
thing they talked about India was, in terms of the caste system, the sati practice, a very backward India was projected.
Right.
So that shocked me, and that's when I started writing. And
Yeah.
so over a period of time, it has now come to a time that I now write only about history. And of course, I do write about water issues, but I'm no longer with the water magazine that I was editing since 2019. Uh, Ever since my first book did well, that's all I've been doing, writing
Yeah.
on history.
Yeah. No, I mean, the misrepresentations that you mentioned in history textbooks that exist in India as well, but in the US, it's both Hindu Dharma, culture, they're so terribly misrepresented, and it's a very narrow, limited view. And for someone who is familiar with the culture, then it really starts to create this cognitive dissonance, really. And you grew up quite immersed in our culture. In fact, it was my honor and privilege to read about your grandfather, who was a tremendous scholar, a wonderful guru, and I'm sure had a great influence in the path that you took. Could you talk a little bit about him?
So my grandfather, as I mentioned in my article that you have read, so I really didn't speak to my grandfather. By the time I was born, he already, when I was just 2, 3 years old, he had a stroke, so he couldn't speak, but he could of course listen. So I didn't really have those kind of interactions with him. I was too young. But
Yeah.
through my what my mother told me about him, I kept listening to what he used to say, because he has influenced everybody. He has influenced my mother, her brothers, her sisters, everybody, because from their childhood they have been taught so many things by him. And of course he wrote many books. So
Wow.
whatever I knew is through my mother, but the short interaction I had with him, I got a lot of love from him. Even when he could
Yeah.
not speak, I used to sit on his lap, so I remember all that. And through
Yeah.
what they told me about him, I could connect with him. And then as my interest grew, and I'm writing about the same things that he felt, he was passionate about, language, Samskrita, how you should preserve Samskrita because there is so much knowledge in it. That's when I actually connected with him. In the last 10 years, I've connected very deeply with him, probably doing the kind of work that he would have liked me to do.
Yes, yes. We don't necessarily have to engage personally sometimes,
Right.
although that would be ideal. But the imprint that our ancestors, our family leaves on us, that energy carries us through, continues to inspire us. And as a teacher, as a scholar, he inspired many people, not just his family. And obviously, that inspiration continues to guide you. And that's the work that you're doing to document what heritage was, what happened in the past. One of the charges that is often leveled against us is when we take an interest in the past, in our heritage, is that why should we care about the past? Why does the past matter? Could you talk to that?
Yes, this is a thing I faced a lot in the beginning when I would write about our great history, our heritage. I was told that, we should be focusing on the future. We can't just be resting on past glory. But that is where I think it's very important to make this point that the past, India's history, India's past is so inspiring that if we are not taking any inspiration from it, then it's utterly stupid. We are just wasting it. So it's I mean, if we were a country which had not achieved much, then I can understand that we don't really need to look at the past. But we are a country who generated so much knowledge. There is so much, so much of culture. There is so much of beautiful history, and because we have got deracinated so much, we do not
Yes.
know all that, and we've got colonized. So it makes sense to connect with our past, to take inspiration from it, to learn lessons from it, and then to take all that knowledge and see how it is relevant today, because it is. A
It
lot of
is.
the knowledge that we nurtured in our civilization is relevant forever. It was not just meant for that period, because these
Right.
life lessons that we even today we are told, we are told in management, this is the way to do work, in various other disciplines. You find all this when you go back to India's past, see what's in the shastras, you see what has been said by these sages. You find that a lot of it is exactly that which is being rediscovered today. It is actually
Right.
the knowledge that our rishis spoke about. So I think
Yeah.
that is why we need to connect with our past, take inspiration from it, and then move forward, because it has a lot to offer to the world.
Yes, yes, and it has a lot to offer to the world. It also defines who we are. It helps us understand who we are, and if we don't tell our story, it'll be told for us. Like you just discovered the textbooks in the U.S. or in Western media or just in popular media were often frequently misrepresented because we're being represented through colonial lenses still, and even
Yes,
we have learned to internalize that. Colonial visions of ourselves. And
right.
that's one of the reasons I think we're disconnected from our heritage. apart from the invasions, colonizations? I mean, what do you think? What are the reasons as to why we are so disconnected,
I think
beyond?
it's because so why we are disconnected, I think it's like so we got, number one, we got invaded in the past a
Mm,
number of times, and there was physical destruction. So the Islamic conquest of India was very violent, and there was a
yes,
lot of physical destruction of our temples and our universities. So in my book I've spoken about that, how Nalanda was destroyed, Vikramshila was destroyed, so many centers of education. So when you destroy an educational center, imagine what you have destroyed. So many
mm,
years of learning, right? So many years of collection of knowledge, putting it in the books. And when you burn the library itself, so many books get destroyed. Teachers, when they are killed, you can imagine how much knowledge is gone. That happened with us in the medieval period when we were invaded. And then of course a lot of this conversions, religion, people being forced to give up their religion, all that happened. And then after all that came the colonial period, the European colonialism. Of course, some people call the Islamic conquest also as colonialism.
yes,
And that also is an argument. So the British colonialism, I think, was even more damaging because that created that real deracination. Because when the educational system was changed from the root itself, from the primary education itself, that happened during the British period. Because when
right,
the Islamic conquest happened, the higher centers of learning were destroyed. But when the European colonialism happened, they destroyed even the primary schooling systems. So
right,
that's when we were all forced to learn English, and we forgot our regional, our own mother tongues. And so when we don't know our mother tongue, then a lot of knowledge goes away right there, because there are
right,
no words for some of a lot of these are the native words cannot be translated to English.
yeah,
So that happened. I think the re-racination is a combination of the Islamic conquest and the colonialism, which was continued after independence. So a lot
yes,
of blame also comes on the governments of the past 70, prior to 2014, definitely, when we were, it was just a continuation of the colonial education policy.
right,
So English continued as the medium of instruction, and then
yeah,
everything was taught from the colonizers point of view, whether it's the sciences, even the history, the way the government, when the British was represented as being like a fair government, which is passing these laws which are for the benefit of people, but it was nothing like that. And the
yeah.
looting, the amount of looting of Indian wealth, that has really not been brought out well in our history books. uh,
Exactly, exactly.
yes,
We were completely looted, pushed into complete poverty, in fact,
yeah.
deindustrialized. And there's it's so astonishing that we don't discuss or interrogate colonial narratives sufficiently after the idea that the British might have wanted to prevent subjugation or oppression while they were subjugating an entire people, an entire nation, is so, you know, just bewildering that someone could buy that. And it is a failure of our intellectual elite to have decolonized, to not have decolonized, and to not have interrogated these narratives, and these continue to be pushed upon us.
And it's
And
like there is this narrative that they actually modernized us. So we are
yes,
told that they brought science, they brought math, and before that,
mm,
we were in the dark ages. Whereas
yes,
what they did is that they actually killed off all the native education system, which was working very well, and which has been documented by their own surveys. So when we
yes,
read the Dharampal's The Beautiful Tree, he's talking about a pre-colonial schooling system which was excellent, which
yeah,
was actually rooted. It was the people were learning Ramayana and Mahabharata in schools.
right,
So they were very much in tune with the culture. And then suddenly that's all uprooted, and now they are forced to learn, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Imagine that kind of.
yes,
It's literally dumbing down the people. That happened when the British came. And
yes,
then when they taught sciences, they never went back to the history of sciences to tell us that where did this Pythagoras theorem come from? They never taught us about Baudhayana. They never
right,
told us about how much the Greeks and the Egyptians learned from India, the Arabs learned from India, and then that knowledge was repackaged and given back to us. That was never told to us. So we
yes,
always were told that the British modernized us. They gave us the railways, and the other thing is, the poverty, the extent of poverty that we were thrown into. because of
Yes.
which now there are, people are dirty, they don't have access to water. All those things are also a result of colonial policies, and which
Yes.
were later continued as well by the future, by independent India also didn't really follow the right policies.
Right.
So this is not brought out. And then we are told that, we were poor, we didn't know anything. And then these people came and they taught us maths and
Yes.
science. Otherwise, we were living in the dark ages.
Yes. And the interesting thing when you start looking into this is that we're not the only civilization or the only people to have been subject to this kind of terrible propaganda that we were so backward and they had to come civilize us. Every I mean, every colonized country, look at all the countries in Africa, in South America, they're all grappling with the same identity issues because they were all told that they were backward and they needed to be civilized and that their native culture needed to be ejected. So sometimes the conversations in India simply don't take into cognizance that this was their playbook, that to tell us that we were backward. And
Right.
just it is so astonishing to me that we don't pay attention to the fact that our civilization asks for jnana, even even in Gayatri Mantra, we ask for knowledge,
Mm.
and we pay so much attention to Shaucha, we pay so much attention to Prakriti. Yet we're told that we are so dirty and illiterate, and thank God the British came to save us, and
Yes.
we've forgotten who we were.
Right.
So,
That's
yeah,
sad. But the thing is that in the other countries where they were colonized, there was not such a strong education system that was in place. So the destruction is more in our case because there
yeah,
was this very functional ecosystem of learning that was
yes,
there, and that was destroyed, right? Whereas in the other cases, it was mainly taking away their raw materials, taking away their wealth. But actual destruction of an educational system which was
yes,
transmitting the knowledge of thousands of years, very advanced knowledge, that happened
yes.
in India. I feel that's the difference between what happened here, happened in India versus what happened in the other
Yeah.
countries which were colonized.
Yeah, and it's interesting the point that you made about the twinkle, twinkle, little star, and ring around the rosy, those absurd rhymes that we learn.
Mm.
Actually, when you look at so many regional rhymes that we learn, the songs that we sing in Tamil, for instance, Aram Se Virumbu, they all teach you about dharma right from the start, and they teach you about your culture. But when we start to learn in English, ring around the rosy was about the plague in the in Britain,
Mm.
and we sing that completely without any context, without any
Mhm.
understanding, as if it means anything to us. And so we
Right,
are unable to understand ourselves, I mean, because we've just lost our language and we've lost our ability to see ourselves.
right.
So that brings us to why it is so important to connect with our heritage. Could you speak to that? Because I mean, we spoke about that a little bit, but why it is so critical that we need to um, center this as, because it why is it important to center our heritage in our view of ourselves?
Right. So we need to connect to our civilization for many reasons. One of them, I think, is that it makes us very authentic. So as Indians, as Hindus, I feel that we are not being very authentic until we know our past and we connect to our heritage. And once we connect to it, when we become authentic, it gives us confidence. It gives us confidence. So when I speak to younger people and if they ask me why we need to connect with our past, I tell them that when you become authentic, it leads to a host of benefits. It improves your happiness. When you're more authentic, you're also able to be more happy because you're confident. You're not faking anything. You're not pretending to be something you're not. With that, so you're speaking your own real language when you become authentic. That's very
Mm.
important. And then, of course, as I told you, the inspiration. When you connect to your civilization, you have all these range of wonderful texts, whether it's the Ramayana, Mahabharata, and then if you connect to Indian sciences, you will need read about, the Vaisheshika, you read Nyaya Vaisheshika. You'll learn the
Right.
various darshanas. You will have different concepts of looking at the world, and all of
Yeah.
them are very deep, and they also give you deep happiness when you explore them.
Yeah.
And then you realize that you've been leading a very shallow life. So the
Yes.
new, this this modernization, westernization has actually made us shallow in many ways because we are only looking at things that are visible to us, material
Yeah.
benefits. And once you start connecting to your heritage, you just become such a deep person. So everything, you then you realize that you're not. This is not just one life that you have. Like
Yeah.
this typical expression that you hear in the Western world, you got only one life. No, that's a very, very typical colonized way of talking. We don't have just one life.
Yeah.
So you everything expands, your whole universe expands, your understanding expands.
Yes.
That is the importance of connecting to our civilizational heritage. And of course,
Yes.
I could talk about this a lot. One is, of course, becoming more authentic. Second is you become a force for good in the world. I feel that when you connect to your civilization, when a Hindu connects to his or her civilization, he or she becomes a force for good in the world, because now you are our shastras, our worldview is such that we don't have boundaries. So
Yes.
we look at the whole universe, we look at the cosmos. So we look at
Yes.
what's good for the whole universe. We look at the prithvi as an organism, right? It's a living thing.
Everything is interconnected.
Everything is interconnected. All this understanding of everything being interconnected, the systems approach, all those things
Yes.
that are being now newly packaged and taught to us is actually
Yes.
intrinsic to our worldview. So that
Yes.
is one very big advantage of connecting to our civilization, that you become a force for good in the world. The environment, you would not if you go back to your past and you look at how environmental sciences was not even a subject. Why? Because everything was nature centered. Our education was nature centered. So
Yes.
you would look at trees, you would look at animals, and you would think they're as important as you. So you would not
Yes.
think that, oh, I have to preserve this. You would know that, oh, it is me. All these things are part of me. So
Yes.
it's not an external subject that has to be taught. So
Yes.
every subject was connected with the environment, with nature. So you're
Yes.
that deep. You become that deep when you connect your past, when your civilization. So it is very destructive, or it is bad when Hindus are deracinated, because then they become like the others, in the Abrahamic worldview, where the world is for your enjoyment. Exploit
Yes.
the rivers, exploit everything, because this world, you have one life, enjoy as much as you can in this one life. That is the way they
Yes.
look at the world, right? So
Exactly.
becoming a Hindu would be good for you and would be good for the world. So it's become a
Yes.
force, you become a force for good. That's what I say.
Yes. It's a difference between an exploitative worldview as opposed to one where you value and respect and have gratitude for everything that
Gratitude.
is part of your life. They
Yes,
talk about
gratitude is a key word. I forgot to mention that. Thanks for reminding me. When we connect to our civilization, we also become more grateful for everything around us.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so when we have this whole concept of Devi Devtas, right? Grama Devata, Kul Devi, Kul Devata. So that all these concepts help us to take care of the environment around us, help us to follow Shocha. So,
yeah,
and then, what happens is today the world is now trying to do those quick fix solutions. Now that the rivers are polluted, the air is polluted. So they are telling us to be environmentally conscious, but that's something that doesn't come from within. If you just tell somebody to, be conscious of the environment, it doesn't come like that by telling them, by teaching a whole 4-year course on environment. It doesn't come
yes,
like that. It only
yes,
comes when you are right from childhood. You are taught the Hindu way. You are taught that this is a Devi, Ganga is a Devi, okay,
yes,
Vayu is a Devta. So when you're taught like that, automatically it is inbuilt in you. So that is the reason I feel that if unless we change to that worldview again, we cannot
yes.
stop anything, any of the ruin that's happening around us.
Yes. And in fact, in one of the Upanishads, there's a story of I think Satyakama, where the guru asks him, "What did you learn?" And he says, "I learned from nature, from the sun and the moon, and about our interconnection." And
Mm.
so by observing nature, this was a big part of learning,
Right,
and recognizing that interconnection as well. And
right.
again, that um, knowledge that was centered. And we have millennia of knowledge traditions that our heritage has to offer, that it would be
Hmm.
just completely foolish to forget that and not learn from that, and to pass it on and have solutions for the present as well.
Yes,
um,
absolutely. The solutions
yeah,
for the present is something that is unfolding to us even today. This what is that? There's something called non-sleep deep rest, which is being used nowadays for
deep relaxation,
relaxation.
yes.
I mean, it's yoga nidra, right?
Yeah,
Which they are now they are now teaching you that this is very good for you. It's going to help you to center yourself and all that. So, but then this is ancient knowledge, right?
yes,
So many other things like the new
yeah,
concepts that they're coming out with is all ancient Indian knowledge. So that's something that, in
yes,
fact, I had stood up and questioned a panel when I was editor of Asian Water, and there was this panel discussion going on about one water, and they were trying to tell us that we need to look at this water as the same water that is drunk by animals and by birds, and the plants also need water, and the humans also drink. So it's actually one water. We should all think of water as an entity which is to be shared by all these, and so we will call it as one water. So I found it very interesting, very funny actually, and I asked them, "What is new about what you're saying? All you have to say is that this is the Indian way of looking at the world, the one water thing that you're talking about." I said, "I don't find anything new about it."
yeah,
I told them all about what is there in the Hindu understanding of the of nature, and so they all
yeah,
became a little bit sheepish in that panel discussion. And then they said, "Yes, this is ancient knowledge, but we are bringing it out in a new way so that we understand it." So that also emphasized to me that we Indians haven't brought out our ancient knowledge as in terms of new terminology which people can
right,
use. So
yes,
that was
yes,
something I felt that day.
yeah.
We
And
should
unless
be,
we're aware of it, we can't bring it out. So,
yeah, we need to
but
mine. We need to mine our own knowledge, our own ancient
yeah,
knowledge, and bring out new terms before they do it. Otherwise, they will now tell you that Gaia, Earth is Gaia. Gaia is a Greek goddess who is the goddess of Earth. So there's a new concept of Gaia, and it's not a new concept for us, right? For us, there's Prithvi, Bhumi Devi.
yeah, yeah. I mean, well, I mean, some of it is just blatant appropriation of our concepts. I
Right,
mean, some of us are
right.
so clueless, we don't realize that they are appropriating. Like you just mentioned, yoga nidra is non-sleep, deep relaxation. Meditation is mindfulness, and
Mm.
Surya Namaskar is sun salutations, and some of them there are Christian groups which literally call it sun, son, like son of God salutations. So I mean,
Right.
it's just. And our Ayurvedic, so many remedies and actives, like rasayanas, like ashwagandha, is now has been, and turmeric even, that we had to fight a case for that. So these are now patented with as tetrahydrocannabinoids, and ashwagandha is KSM 66. So the point is that they are taking our knowledge, they're mining actively our heritage, while we just sit cluelessly and just not even aware that this is happening. So
And that's one reason why, when you ask me why should we connect to our heritage, it's also about protecting our intellectual property. So
yes,
if we go back and know our history, we know what's our ancient knowledge systems, then we also know what we have to protect, and we will also prevent the plagiarism and the copyright. I mean, there's no copyright as such, but the taking over of this intellectual wealth and patenting of the Western by the Western world, which has been happening, which you mentioned. So this is a very good reason for connecting to our knowledge. A lot more
yes,
is being lost even as we speak, right? They are going
yes,
to, even this, what do you call that term? Jalniti, where you put water in one nostril, bring it out from the other nostril. Even
yes.
that is now, it has been patented in the West. I see that they're bringing out their own with
Yeah,
patent names on those bottles for
yeah,
doing this
yeah,
Jalniti. So lots
yeah,
of things, and it needs concerted effort. It's not the government has to work with people, and it's a lot of resources to be a lot of time and resources have to be spent on preventing this stealing of Indian knowledge and patenting by the Western world. It took, I
yes,
think, 1 year for the turmeric patent to be stopped. It
yes,
took 1 year
yes.
for the government to do it, whereas we
Yeah.
lost the neem one, right? Neem was taken away.
Well, no, it's they kind of got that, but there's just so many. I mean, for these, the turmeric, neem, and basmati were the ones that they
Mhm.
focused on, but there have
Okay.
been like hundreds and thousands, literally, of
Right.
active ingredients from Ayurveda, and just traditional herbal knowledge. While in India, you see, when Ayush promotes traditional knowledge, there's just bunches of people just ready to mock it, and it's just absurd that these same things are being stolen from us. On the one hand, our heritage is being erased because we're not aware of it. On the other hand, it's being appropriated and stolen. So
Right.
we absolutely must connect. And I hope
Absolutely.
our conversations with you and the tremendous work that you have done will bring us forward, because we must know our past to know the future. So,
Absolutely. We
yeah,
we are you will be like leaves that don't know they are part of a tree. As Michael
yes,
Crichton said, that if you don't know your history, you're like leaves that don't know it is they are part of a tree, and that
yes,
really applies to us.
that's so beautiful, and that is so appropriate. That's exactly what we are right now.
Mm.
And so many future generations don't realize they're part of something much bigger. And
Right.
I'm really looking forward to our future conversations, Sahanaji, with our conversations on how we manage water, how we manage waste, how we had a huge ecosystem of learning, just all the tremendous information that you have. Just really looking forward to having those conversations with you. Thank you so much for being here today, and
Thank you so much for inviting me. I look forward to the conversations.
thank you so much.